Today, I want to talk about the audacity to change your career. And if you've been listening to other episodes of Coherence Podcast, maybe you're hopefully starting to feel inspired like, wow, all these people have figured out work that really makes sense for them. And if you're someone who feels like you don't really have that click, where things aren't really lining up in that satisfying way that makes you just feel like you can be at peace with what you're doing for work, then I would just say, like, don't despair. It doesn't mean that you can never find that. It really just means that you have an opportunity to reflect on what themes have shown up in your life and to understand better what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, and then tell the coherent story of what you want to build in your next work and life chapter. I know that switching careers, and you can take that kind of however you want. Like, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily switching industries, but maybe even roles within a company. Maybe you're changing up the format of thinking about regular employment into self employment. Whatever that shift might look like for you, I do know that change just generally can bring up a lot of feelings and fears, right? I know firsthandedly, I used to hear a set of different fears in my head, kind of a very unhelpful voice that was saying, like, maybe you're never going to find your thing. Maybe it's just like not in the cards for you. You're not going to feel that passion that other people seem to have, and you're just going to feel okay about it. And ultimately, maybe the fear was like, there's something wrong with me. So if you have any voices in your head that sound like that, I feel you. They don't make you feel good. But that awareness that those voices are even there is the first step to talking back to them, letting other more constructive narratives take up more space and really dial up the volume on those. So if I had totally given in to that voice and just stopped looking, I would still be in that state. But because I didn't ultimately listen to them and I kept trying and I kept sitting with myself and reflecting and putting the pieces together and experimenting, I did find my fit. I found coaching. And it's not just like I arrived at the destination and now I'm like kicking my feet up and, you know, case closed. My business has had a lot of different iterations, and I'm constantly finding ways to be creative and stretching and seeking within it. But I think the difference for me is like I feel like I'm kind of in the home base of my role, and I get to play inside that sandbox as opposed to continually looking for a different sandbox. And that is a distinction. So, are you unhappy in your sandbox and you want to go find another one? Or are you striving within it? And it's just about kind of finding another fit within the smaller container that you're already in. I want to cover 5 different myths that can come up that I hear in my coaching calls all the time about why career changing isn't possible for someone, or constraints that they're putting on it. Like, and I can only change careers if XYZ. And for each of these myths, I'm going to illuminate a corresponding case study of a real person, of a real client of mine who is a great kind of counterpoint to that myth. So follow along with me. Myth number 1 is that I need to do something that linearly builds on my past jobs. While I am all about sense making and telling a coherent story, I think that sometimes the pressure of like, what will other people see when they look at how I did this one thing and then I sort of jumped into this other thing? What are they going to think? Will that work? Are they going to take me seriously? Right. And there's something truly to be said about mapping existing skills onto a new skill set and kind of navigating that transferable skill process. But I think this myth that you need to have something that really is linear, it's so obvious, right? Like, I was a designer, then I was a senior designer, then I was a design manager, then I was a design director, right? Some people are going to have that sort of ladder climbing clarity in their LinkedIn profile, and many of us are just not. So I want to talk about a client of mine, Tam, who he was someone who started his career by dropping out of university, teaching himself how to learn digital marketing, and he did great for himself. He built a good group of clients for his marketing services, but as he was traveling, he felt like he had a calling that was kind of asking him to follow his joy more than he was, um, truly doing within the digital marketing realm. And he eventually listened to that calling and quit his job and did a chess sabbatical where he studied and he competed full time. And he was just in it to really experience the sabbatical, the experience of playing chess. It wasn't really kind of like, what am I going to do with this? Or how's this going to build and lead to the next thing? And after the sabbatical ended, he got another job sort of in the general realm that he was in before, but this time kind of building out events and community. And then again, on a travel trip, he found a new passion, which was taking bachata classes, and he became hooked. And now Tam is actually a founder of Bachata Library, which is his own company, and he reports that it's the best decision that he's ever made. He kind of had little fits and starts of entrepreneurship before, but nothing has ever felt this natural. And he's finding himself just like so easily putting a lot of time and energy into building Bachata Library. So, Tam, I think, is a great example where if he said, "Oh, I have to only stick in digital marketing," I mean, he would never have created a bachata company, right? But I think we can also trace different threads through Tam's interests. He likes to teach other people. So he's teaching other people with bachata. He mentored people with chess. He has written books and he runs a blog. He likes to write and share. And I think it's someone who really loves to learn, teach, build community, and enjoy life. And that can be enough of a thread for him to feel like, okay, this is a coherent story about why I'm doing these things. And I don't have to have every single sort of topic or format of the job build from one thing to another. So I want to pepper in a couple stats here. Really, that nonlinear career paths are the norm. And the average person holds 12.4 jobs between the ages of 18 and 54. And people who are working between the ages of 25 and 34 typically hold a job for about 2.5 years. So I want to normalize switching jobs. That is, to certain employers' dismay, that is just the norm. And when asked in the survey of why people felt like they didn't make a career change, they felt like it was because they had a lack of transferable skills or knowledge. But I think we need to realize like the workforce is really rapidly changing, and so are the skills that are desired. And I think if you're able to look at the skills that you have and almost detach them from the titles and the context that you applied for them, you can see them in a new light and you can see therefore what is possible. And so that sort of deconstruction process I think can be really helpful to think about projecting paths of what you might like to do for your next chapter. So myth number 2 is that something is too different, right? Oh, I'm interested in something, but it's not me, or I've never done that before. Other people who know me are going to think, "Oh, like that's not Melissa," right? I want to tell you about a client named Julia who felt like she should be in a creative field. Julia was interesting because so many people I'm coaching on are trying to kind of bring more creativity into their work. And Julia almost had the opposite, where she was born to creative parents, entrepreneurs. She went to like an art school. She had tons of friends that are artists. And she started her early career in kind of a designer role. But she kept feeling like something was off. And she was really kind of getting these intuitive hits that, like, something else. And when we started working together and piecing together some of the conversations she'd had with different people in her network, things that piqued her interest, it was clear that she was actually pretty interested in the medical field. And as we kept reviewing other stories from her past, we realized that she really wanted to kind of help people in this very core foundational way that people in medicine do. And she had to challenge herself of her own concept of her identity to say, oh, that's possible for me. I don't have to pursue a like 100% obviously like capital C creative path. And she ended up just doing some informational interviews. She talked to someone she knew who was a medical scribe, and she decided to apply. And so she started getting actual hands on experience in a medical setting by becoming a scribe herself and getting to work with a doctor and patients. And the more she did it, the more she realized, like, yes, this is feeling really good. And ultimately, it gave her the confidence to apply to a pre med program where she's at right now. She's getting more clinical experience, preparing for medical school, and she finds other avenues to be creative outside of work. But she wouldn't have found that fit if she felt like, oh, me, a doctor, me in the medical world, like that's not me, right? It's too different from what I've done or what I know in my family, in my friend context. She had to be brave, right? So maybe there's something that you want to do, something you're interested in, but you can kind of have that limiting belief come in that's like, oh, but it's too different, right? The truth is that your past does not dictate your future. Just because you haven't done something before, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. So just because you've historically worked in one industry or role, you don't have to do that for the rest of your life. Myth number 3 is that you need to have a really clear plan in place in order to make a transition, right? Like I got to have the 5-year plan and it's got to be proofread and, you know, bound in a book, right? I want to share a story about Andrea, who was really ready to leave her news job. The pace, the culture of the newsroom was tiring her out. She was feeling very burnt out. And when we first started working together, she was on the precipice of putting in her notice. And after one conversation, she emailed me this very exuberant email that just said, I quit. I'm so happy and proud I quit. So, she quit without a detailed business plan, and she just had to trust that she had a really developed skill set and she had a lot of amazing experience to bring with her. And she just needed the space to regroup. So, depending on your risk tolerance, depending on your financial runway, I know that these decisions can feel different just depending on those constraints or variables. But Andrea was a great example where she needed some time to just recuperate her energy. She wanted to have more freedom and flexibility in her work, to work on long form projects instead of sort of that tight, short story of the content hamster wheel. And she wanted time to make her ceramics. And a couple months into after quitting, she came across a journalism fellowship, the Nyman Fellowship, and she applied and we worked on the application together and she got it. So she already has completed the fellowship at Harvard, and now she's working as a freelance video journalist and filmmaker and has a partner in a kind of more collaborative project. So Andrew's just one example of someone who, once you actually take stock of your connections, of your expertise that you're bringing, when you kind of even just put it on like a Google Doc, it doesn't have to be pretty or formatted, just to like take stock of all the cool things you've done, the wins, it'll hopefully give you that confidence that you can figure it out, right? You're resourceful, you are supported. And those are the kinds of beliefs that help you um, take the leap before you're ready. So you don't have to just, you know, totally quit quickly without any sort of idea for next steps. You might find some sort of comfort spot along a spectrum of like, okay, I've got a couple of freelance clients, right? Again, using my example, I had steadily been growing my coaching clients, and that's what gave me the confidence to leave my full time job. Myth number 4 is that it's too late, right? I'm behind. Ooh, this one's so painful. I very much felt this way. And it's just so tough to be like, okay, it's too late, right? And I think while there are maybe norms and this belief comes from like looking around and seeing maybe where people your age or what stage of life, what they're doing, or maybe you're interested in an industry that feels like, I don't know, a little bit younger than you. But there are so many people who've found success in what they do later in life, later career changers. And you have, most likely, if you're listening to this, like, unless I have got some, 100-year-old people listening to this, like, you've got time. So, a client of mine, Lisa, comes to mind, who's a ceramicist. And, she was worried that it was too late for her to be an artist. She knew she was creative. She had a background in fashion. She was a buyer from where she was from in Joburg in South Africa. And after she moved to the US, she had 2 kids. She she discovered clay. She had a clay class and she fell in love with it. And she had the ability to build an actual ceramic studio in her house, in her garage. And she really wanted to grow her career as an artist, but it felt like, approaching mid 40s, she felt like, "Ugh, maybe it's too late." But after a few months of working together, Lisa was able to find a lot more confidence in talking about her approach to her work. And that, I think, kind of helped legitimize her sense of a connection to her artist identity. And after a few months, she ended up organizing her first solo show all by herself. That was a glowing success. It was so awesome to see photos of it and just see her art up in an official sort of exhibition setting. So, Lisa is just one example of how, if she had believed that it was too late, she would be, I don't know, I think she'd be unhappy, right? It's like, I found love and then I ignored it, right? Now, if you were to, get to see Lisa, she's just such a badass artist at heart. And it makes me so happy to know that she embraced that, as hard as it was at times. So the reality is that your age and timing doesn't impact your success, right? Again, short of you trying out for the Junior Olympics as like a 30-year-old, something that's probably not possible, most career paths, even the ones that take a lot of schooling, are still possible. Doesn't mean that there aren't trade-offs, but they are, if you really want it. And I really think there's no shortage of success stories of people finding success later in life, right? Think Toni Morrison, Julia Child. So you don't know who you're going to end up being. The last myth I want to talk about today is that you need more money to change careers, or you need to be rich. Um, yeah, more money never hurts, right? And it can give you that peace of mind. But I don't think it's always the 100% necessary to have more. And I think part of the work you need to do is figure out how much runway do you need to feel comfortable, right? Depending on how risky the business is that you are. If you're someone who can get clients tomorrow, that's pretty different than someone who wants to, direct a film that's going to take a lot more time and effort and people involved. So, what is the actual nature of the thing that you want to do? And then how much runway do you predict? I think of my client Kaylee, who started her career working in hospitality and nannying roles to pay the bills. She grew up as one of 11 children, and she felt like money was tight. Outside of nannying, she worked odd jobs in freelance illustration, social media content creation, and selling her ceramics and vintage clothes. It was all kind of like a patchwork of different income streams. But she knew that she really wanted to center her creativity at the core of how she was bringing in an income. She just didn't know like what the outlet was for that, and she was worried about really believing in investing in her creative self, and especially what that might mean financially. Over time, she realized that her design skills could actually be applied to web design, and that was a pretty both creative but also kind of high in demand service, and she could replace her nannying income with freelance clients. She invested in a Squarespace design course, taught herself how to be a web designer, and she eventually was able to quit her nannying job. And now she's doing full-time freelance web design and illustration, really growing her client list, increasing her rates all the time. She did my website. I think she's amazing. I get compliments on it all the time for my brand and my illustrations. So Kaylee's a great example of how she knew she was talented, and she had to believe in that and not let financial fears kind of cripple her from taking the next step. So you don't need to be rich in order to switch jobs. If you never see that a higher paid career is possible for you, then you're probably going to remain stuck under your current earning ceiling. So you need to get clear and be responsible about what your true financial needs are and do some tests. But you can find an experimental path forward that works for your particular level of risk tolerance. And it doesn't have to be like, waiting for the lottery. So the bottom line is that your mindset really matters. What you choose to believe can be the difference between you staying stuck doing something you don't want to do and finding a new path that you love. I have seen this just like time and time again. It's why I do this work. It's like so satisfying to know that someone has agency and you get to be the author of your life. And the way that you start that authorship is to make sure that you're telling yourself the stories that are the most supportive and constructive for you. If you listen to the limiting beliefs, if you listen to these myths, you are just going to stay right where you are. And if you don't like exactly where that is, that's not a good thing. If you're someone who really prizes growth, who wants to evolve, who wants to find that satisfying fit, that snug fit, you need to make sure that your mental hygiene is good so that you're telling yourself stories and beliefs that get you into action and make you all the more confident that it's possible. You can welcome in a change. And I really, really believe that you can. So I hope this short episode was a little boost for anyone who's thinking about making a change, and maybe even for those that already have, to give yourself a pat on the back for doing that important mindset work that it took to get there. It's hard to change. It's not easy. But if we think about it as like a healthy stretch, I'm growing, it feels kind of good, and I'm going to stretch to where I'm comfortable without kind of like overdoing it, I think that's a nice way to frame growth that feels manageable. So what do you want to stretch into? If you are leaving listening to this episode feeling very motivated, but sort of like, okay, I've got my mindset straightened up, but what do I do now? And you feel like you want a little extra support, I am hosting a series of trainings coming up, and I'd love to have you attend. Just go to coherence.studio/work that works training. And that work that works training has dashes in between. So it's coherence.studio/work-that-works-training in order to learn more about what the free training entails, see the upcoming training dates, and figure out how I can support you to further identify what your unique career story is, how to wield that as an asset, how to figure out what your combination of skills and interests and desires is best suited for, and to create a really accessible first step action plan for you to put your ideas to the test. I would be so honored to have you join me, and if I can be a helpful guide along the way as you start to kind of move from this mindset stage to actual reflection, to actual action, then that would make me really happy. So I hope you join.